Yeah.
But, you know, I mean, you know, there were teachers that came to the West. I think the seeds are here in the West. You know, that, I mean, there are ashrams here. There are, yeah, but not the same as the 60s. In the 60s, people were moving into these ashrams full time, into Krishna ashrams, into Shivananda ashrams, into these, you know, Siddha Yoga ashrams. When these sort of 60s guru came over, there was this kind of intense commitment. You don't see that anymore, not in that level. You see a bit of it, but I mean, now it kind of lay practitioners at home. It's become more commodified, maybe more just been absorbed into consumer culture. Even yogis, you know, really, with our yoga mats on one hand and Starbucks and a cup of coffee in the other, you know. So in a sense, you know, but yeah, that you can still find it, that, you know, it's still there, and certainly the 60s, 70s, and I knew I had to go to India to seek that, just to sort of pull all that together. But yeah, the bus was, you know, so I was going from, I was vaguely thinking I was a Buddhist, because I didn't really think I was a Buddhist, but I was kind of still doing the Buddhist thing, and I was heading down.
Idea.
Yeah, I hadn't run into anything. I found Hinduism a tiny bit jarring at first, you know, all the Gari deities, and you know, the oranges and the blues and the yellows and the Durgas and the Hanumans, and the vividness of it all was a tiny bit jarring aesthetically.
Also, they add these speakers. Remember, they get a big kind of loud, like the pujas and blasting on the crackling speakers.
Yeah.
No, it's insane. Yeah.
So anyway, then I'm sitting on this train, and I'm going to see the Taj, and I'm a bit ashamed of myself, because I'm thinking, look, I'm not here to be a tourist, but oh, what the hell, let me just, you know, the train was sort of, so I thought I'll go to Agra, I might as well, you know, just have a look. And the train was a really slow one, you know. I hadn't actually taken a lot of trains, and I didn't realize that a passenger train is, at that time, stops at every tree. Yeah. Right. You don't want to
take you days.
A day, a 2-hour journey. Now it's all a bit different, but you have to get an express. Well, I hadn't quite, you know, figured that out at that early point. So I'm getting on the right. So I'm on this train. You know, the people in the compartment at that time, they'd never seen Westerners before. We're talking about, you know, 78, 79. So even TVs, I mean, obviously they were there, but it's not that everybody had a TV. There might be one TV in a whole street, and people would come around and have a look at whatever was on, you know. So it was early days. You know, still bullocks and plows. There was very few tractors. You know, it changed very fast. At that time, it was still very much the end of that kind of we might call it medieval, whatever you want to call it, but you know, obviously technology was there. There was only one car, the ambassador car, a couple of cars. They weren't all the cars you see no, there was the chunky ambassador, you know. But anyway, so I'm sitting on the, you know, chatting, and, you know, I'm like some sort of a weird mix between a hippie and a sadhu, right? Because I hadn't really situated myself in a tradition at that point. So I was just putting it all together from my own make-believe ideas. And the people were saying, oh, and I was telling them I was a spiritual quest, and I was looking for truth, and I, you know, and I was never going to go back to the West, and I had no money, and I was just traveling, and they said, oh, you have to get down to Mathura. Oh yeah, the big spiritual place. Get down. You know, I never heard of Mathura or Vrindavan, right? When Mathura being the train station for Vrindavan is Mathura. Yeah. So, but they were so sincere, and the train was taking so long, and I would, you know, didn't have anything better to do. So I got down at Mathura. I just got down off the train. You know, I didn't have a ticket or anything. And so back then, you know, the collector come, and I just say, the collector never seen a Westerner. So I would just say, and I was learning Hindi. So I would say best I could, you know, ticket nahi hai, hamare paisa nahi hai. Right, and so they would take you could do that back then. So anyway, got down on Mathura, and I, you know, slept under a tree, because, you know, I didn't have any money. And I just remember what an awful place. Why does everybody all spiritual about this? Because it's near the train station, right? Any train station is a bit, you know. So it was just, I got bitten to death by a mosquito. It was just an awful night. So then I get up. I think that was a bad idea. I should have just stayed on the train. So I'm going to get back on the train. And then this bus comes, and that's what I think what you're talking about. And this bus comes, And this is strange. And I'm not going to go so far as to say it was mystical, but honestly, I had no idea where the bus was going. I had no reason to get on the bus. I had no intention of staying there. All I remember, and I have a clear, maybe now after 50 years or whatever it is, my mind is making parts of this up. I don't know. All I can say is, and this was the case even 5 years after. I was still saying the same story that I'm telling you now. So it's not just time, because I have the same recollection of it much closer to, a few years after it. I remembered seeing the bus, not having any reason to pay attention to it, just a bus coming down the road. My next memory, I'm sitting on the back of the bus, and there's nothing in between. There was no conscious deliberation. Why would I want to get on this bus? Where is it going? Why? I was going to get back on the train. I'm sitting on the back of the bus, and it's going to Vrindavan. So there might be something a little mystical about it, or maybe I'm just fuzzy in the memory, but that's the story I have to share. I'm sitting on the back of the bus. That's all I can remember. Bus goes to Vrindavan, and that was it. I stayed there for 4 years. I got off the bus.
You knew what was at Vrindavan?
Nothing. Knew nothing.
Right.
I didn't know anything about, Krishna or bhakti. I had not even in my dabbling in the West, right? I was reading more of these kind of hippy-dippy type of things like Siddhartha and Carlos Castaneda's. I was reading that kind of druggy things, and druggy sort of spirituality, but nothing like embedded in a real tradition. Or I knew nothing about Krishna. I mean, I'd seen Krishnas in the streets, in the Oxford Street, and they looked like a raggedy bunch of, I was fascinated by them. I appreciated, I was quite happy to be as extreme as that, but it didn't attract me at that time.
Yeah.
I didn't find that attractive. It seemed a little garish and a little in your face and a little slightly, it wasn't very elegant. It didn't have any, I just didn't find it very attractive. What can I tell you? Aesthetically, banging away on cymbals
So what changed your mind then when you got on the bus, off the bus?
What changed my mind is I did spend some time in the Krishna temple there, and just
having no money and having a place to sleep that wasn't kind of full of mosquitoes.
That wasn't a problem, because the hippie culture, I'd already had a little bit of training, just being a hippie, and you're young, you think.
How old were you?
At this point, I would have been 21 or 21, I guess. Right. So you're young, and
it's all right to sleep on the floor and get bitten a bit when you're that age. Yeah,
it's all a big lie. I'm in India. I mean, I was just like blown away. Here I am. I'm in India. I mean, that was just I would walk down the streets just feeling, wow, I'm here. So what attracted me was the intensity of the devotees. They had completely and utter given up everything. Well, I had too, perhaps, but they were completely and utterly immersed with full conviction in this tradition. And I said, and they were happy, they were detached, they were blissful, they were just totally devoted, they were convinced, they had everything I wanted. And so it was the devotees that attracted me initially, not the theology. Theology is.
And it's a mix of Indians and Westerners?
At that time, there were Westerners in that. Yeah, it was a mix. But at that time, there were Westerners that that stopped, within a few years. But there were people like me that were coming in at the tail end of the 70s, in the 70s, and they were just hippies. Some of them had met Krishnas in the West and, wanted to come to the place of origin. They were hippies by disposition, and maybe they were heading over to India anyway, but they knew something about Krishna, and they thought, well, that was one of their stopovers. So there might have been that sort of person there. But I was probably unique in that I totally and utterly stumbled there. I didn't even know. I never heard of Vrindavan. I literally got off the train just because these people were so sincere. I didn't want to disappoint them. I said, all right, I'll get down, so that, I like to think I was called. But one other thing, part of this story though, Adam, is when I was up in Dharamsala, and I knew that this is not my spiritual home, I remember sitting on the bus, and and I can remember with the most intensity, and I understood there's something higher than myself. So in that sense, I've always been a theist. And I've always, I mean, the theistic argument has always been, whether it's modern day intelligent design, whether it's Ramanuja in the 12th century commenting on Vedanta, the basics, and whether it's Nyaya, the logicians, the basic position of the theist is that there must be intelligence behind the order of the universe. So that argument's never going to go anywhere. Whatever discovery science comes up with, whatever they go into string theory and then substring theory and whatever they end up with, there is always going to be a space. There's always going to be that, how does this all come to be? How is this highly intricate, structured? There must be intelligence. So
why? Just the question, why?
Because of order. Because that seems like, for a certain type of thinker, like myself and theists and probably majority of human thinkers, the explanation for order, that it's a more satisfying explanation to say there must be intelligence behind order, rather than to say order just is, or order self-assembles, right? Which you'd have to say if you accept a Big Bang model, because before Big Bang, Greek thinkers and materialistic thinkers thought that the world just it's eternal, so you didn't have to deal with causal explanations. You don't have to say what caused it if you say it's eternal. So all the Greek philosophers thought it was eternal, and that was a problem for Christians up until Big Bang, because Christians, the Bible talks about creatio ex nihilo, but materialists could say, why are you looking for causal explanations? It just was. But with Big Bang, now you have, you can't talk about a moment in time, because before Big Bang, there was no time. But nonetheless, you have a moment, let's just say that. And now you have to, so now you have a much more pressing question. Well, what are the circumstances surrounding that moment? But anyway, irrespective of any of that, so intelligence strikes theistic mind as being a better explanation than no intelligence that things either self-order or that they're eternal, or that there is no cause. I don't know why we're taking this
Oh, you were in the bus. You were in the bus in the north of India,
and I knew that there was a higher intelligence that
right?
Bring us
right.
Back. And I deeply prayed. More deep. It was a deep.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's what I remember. Yeah.
Whatever it is, whoever, please help me. Please help me. I'm seeking truth. And I knew I couldn't find it with my own mental ability. And I knew I wasn't really going to find it in some book or some theology. I mean, I knew that it had to be, there had to be grace. I think I understood that. There had to be grace. And I didn't know then, but now I've come to understand that if you're really, really sincere, you get that grace. So I was actually sincere. In looking at it now, that was a deeply sincere moment, deeply sincere. And the other thing about bhakti is total and utter humility and helplessness, right? All the Ramanujas, the theologians talk about this. We were just reading Chaitanya the other day, more humble than a blade of grass. That's when we attract the attention, the grace of Bhagavan. So I didn't know any of that. And then now I'm imposing those categories right now. But I was in a deep, deep place of utter helplessness, utter sincerity, utter prayer, but from a place of just not asking for anything other than existential guidance. And within 10 days, I was in Vrindavan with all that, what I just said. Completely. Number one, I no reason to get off that train. Number two, I'm finding myself on the back of a bus. Number three, when I get to in Vrindavan, everyone's saying, Angrez Mandir, wahan se jao, Angrez Mandir udhar hai na. So, and next thing I end up in this Krishna temple that I had no attraction to, that I had no connection with. And there I met the devotees, and then I instantly saw that's what I want, that level.
And you weren't skeptical, I suppose. I mean, because I assume, for me, meeting at least the what we call the Hare Krishnas in London, I had that rational training, and I had that skeptical mind that I brought to it, right? And I couldn't let go. I couldn't give over to the belief. I mean, you saw they were happy. I saw also those people were happy, and you just kind of think, I thought, are they kidding themselves? right?
Yeah.
Like something holds me back from I didn't jump in. Yeah.
Well, I think maybe the difference there was I was already committed to giving my life up to it. So I was prepared to bypass reason.
Right.
I'd understood reason was not going to give me what I was looking for. So I'd come to a place where, you know, philosophy and philosophizing and all these so-called great figures, they cannot help me in what I want. So I knew that reason was my guide, but wasn't going to be the ultimate arbitrator of what I sought. So therefore, I was looking for experience, and I was ready to I hitchhiked to India with nothing, no money, and spend months and all of the adventures and dangers and so forth. So when I saw that they were experiencing what I was seeking, the theology took a while to sink in. I thought it was bloody weird, mate. What, God with the flute and blue? Why can't it be pink with a banjo? You know what I mean? what kind of reason? I mean, it's not that I got rid of reason. That they took a while for all that to sink in, and they still. I mean, of course, I didn't stay with the Krishnas. That was my starting. You know, that I owe my spiritual life, I feel, to that experience, and I stayed in the ashram for a few years in the 70s.
Yeah.
So I definitely feel mixed feelings, you know, because I certainly got a real start to my spiritual journey there. But, you know, the ashram became all embroiled with institutionalization and all the rest of it. So at a certain point, I had to leave. You know, it wasn't my home anymore. But the devotees back then, they really in the 60s and 70s and even to the 80s even, that was the real thing. They were, whatever may have been going on in the higher echelons of the institution and the corruption and the whole guru egos and all the sannyasi ego, but the grass and file devotees were really surrendered. They were performing bhakti yoga in the deepest possible way. They were surrendered to to Bhagavan. They were engaging in incredible tapas, austerities, and they were given everything. Nobody owned anything.
Was Sri Prabhupada still there?
No, he just left. I missed him by a year and a half.
Right.
I'm kind of glad that I did, in a sense, because you know, I'm kind of a guy, old school. If you kind of give your word, you sort of stick to it. So if I had taken initiation from Prabhupada, I probably would have felt moral or a spiritual obligation to stay in ISKCON. But the fact that I didn't, and you know, that I didn't feel any compulsions about leaving it when the time was right to leave it. But no, I never met him. But you know, I still consider him to be one of my gurus, even though I never met him, because his books really, you know, I was just a hippie reading Siddhartha, right, and just stumbling about. But the books really gave me clear, tradition-based, authentic in the sense of lineage-based, that sort of a sense. Guidance.
So even though there's somewhat corruption and disappointment around the ISKCON movement, you still think Prabhupada has integrity and
no question, yeah.
Right.
I mean, you know, he said a lot of things in his books that one shudders at now. You know, he was obviously in the sense that in the cultural sense.
Yeah.
He was a male Brahmin of the turn of the 19th, 20th century. So he had what we would now call, you know, certain sexist, certain elitist, certain casteist types of, you know, that was just his cultural mindset. But as you know, one has to be mature about that and situate him in his time. But if you can push all that aspect aside, the actual Krishna bhakti I mean, he made millions of devotees. So that there is a potency in that aspect of his teaching. So if people, you know, if I don't really read his books, I mean, nowadays it's been many decades since I really read those books, but they trigger, and I remained within the Krishna tradition. After leaving ISKCON, I didn't leave the Vrindavan Krishna tradition. I just connected to other branches of that.
And you're still in that now, right?
Still in that. You're still connected to